Hello, Eric.
Hello, Richard. It's great to be back for another week.
Good to see you.
An interesting week, and lots to discuss.
Definitely. I'm fresh off a few days with a outstanding group of people at Ben Hunt's Epsilon Connect conference. And it was really great. Probably the best conference I've ever been to. And just because of the caliber of people that gathered, and it was intentionally held small, 100 people, it was capped at 100 people. And it was really the first time I'd been at a conference in a few years. So that was interesting. But it was really all about connecting in person. Like I've been a part of this community for a while. I participate in the forums, Zoom meetings, etc. But it was so amazing to spend time together in person and to meet together in person. And it just, in many ways, Ben Hunt's world is talking about narrative, and the weaponization of narrative. But it was just a profound reminder that this world of words, that we're all living in right now, right? Which we saw lots of words last week, and I'm sure there'll be more words this week, ain't the real thing. So I continue to be completely fascinated by this kind of intersection of media and technology that I enjoy our discussions about, and very interested in what jumped out at you last week and how you see things through the lens of a media professional with the experience that you do, understanding media the way you do, and if we look at the debt ceiling drama that we saw, right, over the past month, and ending with a kind of a fizzle, if you will.
But you know
really
what?
love to see that through your eyes.
Well, I'm very curious. I want to circle back to your real world experience with real people in a real room. But, look, as it pertains to the debt ceiling, and we had talked about this before, we have seen the movie before a lot. We already knew how it was, fizzle, but lo and behold, the Red Sea parted and they came to an agreement at the almost last second, as predicted. However, what did the whole country do? We were all, well, not all, but most participatory in the drama, the highs, the lows, the rights, the lefts, the back, the forth. For how long? We were held captive by a story that, if you've been around long enough, you knew how it was going to end. Surprise, not really. But that is, in a nutshell, it's become the role of the media today. That is what they do. They literally take us up and down on this roller coaster ride to a very foreseeable conclusion. I think that this was such a great example, and I'm glad that we talked about it before, because I did say we know how it's going to end. With a lot of fireworks or not. This was not, but lo and behold, they resolved everything. I think it's a great lesson for anybody who's ever watched this. In look at the things that you read about. If you were engaged in the ongoing drama or non-drama about the debt ceiling, if you were engaged, look at where you got your information from. It's a really good way to reflect back on where did you get your information throughout the course of the weeks that led up to the inevitable fix. Where do you get your information from? How many of the places, because I think this is so important for people, doing this for a living, to constantly assess your information resources and say, how much drama did I actually buy into during this whole period of time while the debt ceiling was being debated? And how many places did I pull some interesting facts out so I could learn a little bit more about it? At the end of the day, to me, the debt ceiling is as simple as spending money on credit cards that you don't have the money to spend it on. You keep spending, keep spending, keep spending, and if I know that I can magically spend more when I'm tapped out on my limit, okay, I'm going to spend more and I'm going to get something else. To me, it's that simple. It never plays itself out that simple, though.
So one of the big themes in at the conference was the difference between price and flow. So in the markets, we have prices, right? One of the big price events in the markets over the past couple of weeks was NVIDIA reaching $1 trillion market cap and being up something like $200 billion in one day, right? That's all price. And everybody's focused on price. I've said before, I think price is a hallucinogenic drug, right? But what really is the game isn't the price. The real game is the flow. How much can you get those shares to change hands, right? How much can you get, stories that drive transactions, drive new events, drive new financial innovations, et cetera? And the big difference between price, which is kind of what everybody's focused on, and flow. Okay, so if we look at the debt ceiling drama, there's not literally prices, right? Maybe there was a betting market that you could have bet on the debt ceiling drama. But, all those stories were kind of like prices. You had high prices, you had low prices, you had points of elation, you had points of despair. But really what they were trying to generate was some kind of flow, some kind of activity that would kind of bring one side or the other to the table, right? So in the media world, right, what would flow mean to you in the media world?
Well, that's the
problem. You as a media person, impressions, advertising dollars, clicks, what does it mean to you?
Well, while flow is the important part of the story, flow gets a disproportionate amount of, airtime. That's not where all the emphasis is. Meanwhile, all of that drama that is what creates flow. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And who's covering that? Meanwhile, it's the most important part of the story, which goes to show you, take a look at who you're getting your information from. It's all about flow. That's it. Right. All about flow, not really, some arbitrary number. Like you literally introduced this and laugh about the arbitrary, number that goes up to, to the moon. Where's that coming from? While everybody's paying attention here, the issues flow. That's the big issue. It's significantly less covered. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think flow is things like, did the Wall Street Journal write about your position in a favorable way, or did the New York Times, right? So there's all these still kind of big institutional media players, and flow in media is really about, who covers your narrative in what way, right?
That's right.
And so, that's what I'm guessing you've seen over your career in media. And how has, what's happening with flow today in the media world, right? Is Twitter a big deal still? Is social media a big deal? Or is it still the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post? What does flow look like?
Yeah, the way that all works together is it. I would have said in its purest form 15 years ago, Twitter is the match that lights a news cycle. The story breaks on Twitter, and you inevitably see it everywhere else first. I told you the story about Captain Sully landing on the Hudson, and I saw those pictures on Twitter first, and on every major news network. Up anywhere between 8 and 10 minutes later, it started on Twitter. It went that way for a very long time until very recently. Now there's a lot of debate about Twitter. What is Twitter now? Is it different? I still say it still is a match that lights a news cycle up. But I also say things like the New York Times, where a lot of people aren't reading. And I'm just using them as the Washington Post, you name the paper. They also have a relevant part in the mix, because the thing about it is, if you get into the Wall Street Journal, you get into the New York Times, it'll get tweeted all over the place. So it all fits together. Who has the greatest weighting on any given day? Who's able to create the type of stories that we're all going to be interested in? Because drama, unfortunately, in the good old days when I was a kid, they sold the National Enquirer at the checkout line of the grocery store. It was the #1 read print publication, the National Enquirer. I mean, we had, Tom Cruise landing on the moon and getting divorced every other day. That's the kind of news that people were buying, not real news, the National Enquirer. Things have changed a little bit, but it's still the same premise. People love, they're intoxicated by the story. They're drawn in by the story. And if they're not drawn in, don't worry, your phone it'll be dinging all day with your alerts and tweets and, whatever it is. So, what's more important? To me, one of the things that we're missing in this entire conversation is who's filling in. Like, to me, the Red Sea's parting a little bit, and there's opportunities for news sources. Like podcasts are a perfect example. There's some really influential podcasts now, actually, and it's a growing list. A whole different form of journalism. And I think that a whole different form of journalism is in motion.
So last week, Sam Altman and some others signed a one-sentence statement that I don't have it in front of me, but paraphrasing, it was something to the effect of, AI poses a threat of human extinction, and we should take that seriously.
Well, boy, isn't that drama? Whoa.
There's some serious drama, right?
Yeah.
But, the idea, to me, I'm going, well, what is the threat of AI? I mean, is it going to get a hold of the nuclear football codes or something and blow us all up? Is it going to launch drones into the sky and shoot us all down? What is this threat of human extinction, right? So that's one of the things I've been thinking about over this past week. And I think the threat that the genuine, legitimate threat that people are concerned about is that AI is going to get so good at telling stories that it's basically going to, be able to move us through story anywhere that it wants to, literally run us off a cliff like a bunch of lemmings.
Well, that's making the assumption. None of us have a thought in our head, for starters. But it's also, as we sit here so fearful about the robot that's going to come in and take over my life, or whatever it is that this increasing. Watch how this story on fear just grows and grows. Again, it's so just like the debt ceiling ending, the way that AI is going to be covered, watch. It will literally grow. This isn't some crazy prediction that's like, it's just common sense. The story is going to make us more and more and more and more afraid. Why? Because we'll be more and more interested in clicking and reading. That's the best story that, journalism has, is why we should all be afraid. Meanwhile, I don't know, ChatGPT doesn't know what, vehemently disagrees that the year is 2023. I'm not too threatened by that quite yet.
Yeah, I spoke to my mother and I mentioned AI and she says, "Oh God, that's just so terrifying."
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not that terrifying, Mom. And another one of the things, little nuggets from the conference that was shared was that a big part of what's driving our, absorption in media and technology, because I think, we haven't really talked about technology, but to me, again, it's the intersection between media and technology that's the world we're living in right now, right? Media has been kind of on its current trajectory for at least 100 years, I'd say. I'd be interested in your perspective on this, but I think this goes back to the origins of propaganda, mass media, World War I, World War II, Edward Bernays, et cetera, right? And then technology has just amplified that. And now we've moved it into a digital world and you have cable news, right? And it's nonstop narrative You know, like you said, we've got our phones and we just are consuming narrative all the time, right? So now media is essentially using technology or cooperating with technology to create this virtual, disembodied, untethered world, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that the thing that's gotten unique over the past 20 years, let me know if you agree with this. This was proposed at the conference and I made sense to me, is that the media has figured out how to make these issues seem existential. So if we take it in politics, for example, you know, what's the next election is a life or death situation, right? I mean, how many life or death elections have we lived through now? And here we are, still having a conversation.
Yeah,
Right?
we're
We
still alive.
survived. We survived. But this making issues existential, right? It's all or nothing. There's no middle ground. It's just all or nothing. And you know, what is the most existential issue that the media is putting out today? It's AI. It's literally they're talking about extinction.
Yeah, well, one might look at what you just laid out and say the problem is the media itself. The problem is not what the media is suggesting the problem is. And yeah, lo and behold, we're all still here. The world's still here. You know, we certainly have some issues, but it's not life or death. None of them are. We can make the planet a better place still. And to me, that's always like, let's make the world a better place. How do we do that? While everything is doom or gloom, it's not black and white. There's not a single issue that we have that's black and white, but that's how it's painted. And that's what gets, you know, more people interested.
There was a great meme going around recently. I don't know if you saw it, but it was like a sign with some, you know, letters on it. It said, has anybody tried unplugging the United States and plugging it back in again?
Well, everything works better after you unplug it.
Yeah. So Epsilon Connect was a great reminder that, you know, these are all compelling, important issues. I think they're important cultural issues, important economic issues, important social issues in terms of, you know, how are we interacting with story and how is, you know, media practices, which, you know, I mean, can you make a distinction between media science and propaganda, or isn't that kind of the same thing?
It is the same thing. And,
Persuasion, technology, propaganda, et cetera, right? The weaponization of narrative combined with technology, where now you just have a world that's all narrative, right? And whoever tells the stories, it rules the world.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we deal with that? Because, you know, I mean, that has gotten to the point of being existential.
Yeah, but you know, to your point of you were with in real life,
yeah,
meaning not technology, you were with 100 people. Now, it's a group that, you know, I don't know, I would say in some regards is like-minded. You have a lot of the same philosophy. In other ways, you don't. You've had your own debates, you know, within that platform, within that group. But the difference of the human contact, being with human beings and having the same conversations, wasn't that much different?
It's absolutely different. And to me, you know, that is the solution. That's the only solution. The only solution is to acknowledge that this narrative only digital technology, media driven world is not real. It's something that we can do commerce in, you know, it's something that we can cultivate some relationships in, but we ultimately have to spend time with each other. We have to spend time in nature. We have to spend time in life, you know, and we have to be able to turn off these narratives, or at least set them aside for a period of time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Absolutely. The problem is the narratives and using technology have made them, positively addictive. I mean, and if it's and if not addictive, if I decide to put my phone down for, God forbid, an hour or two, my phone is going to be reaching out to me on a regular basis to draw me back in. I mean, I thought you had sent me the David Foster Wallace commencement, and saying language is the water in which we swim, and it's just fascinating to me how that started with the old fish swimming by the young fish and saying, "Hey, how do you like the water today?" And the young fish swim right by and turn around and say, "What the hell is he talking about? Water? Like,
What is water?" Yeah. And so language and story is the water of the media and now technology supported world, right? Which is like a parallel universe, aka the metaverse.
Yeah, but that's another perfect example. Like a year ago, all anybody was talking about was the metaverse. Right. Didn't quite, seemed like it went off the tracks a little bit. Didn't quite pan out to be the awful environment that we were all assuming that it would be. Seems like all they're doing is laying off people in the great metaverse.
Yep.
But that wasn't the narrative. So, Richard, is there an example of, you're with real people, and these are people that you're in touch with digitally, or some of them anyway, and have been, but now you're with them. Is there a really good example of a conversation that you had while you were there, or an issue that was discussed where you thought, this is such a better way to evolve your thinking?
Absolutely. There was one person who, he and I had kind of connected online, and it was clear that we had some empathy, but just being there and sitting one-on-one with that person, making eye contact with that person, it was a quantum leap in meaning, in care, in communication. So we just have to remember, we can unplug. You had a campaign for it a while back. What was the name of that?
Yeah, it was called offlining, and it really was born in the beginning, in the origins of, again, what I saw coming that didn't take rocket science to see coming. When in my own family, I saw there was 5 different conversations going on at the supper table, because they were under the table on the cell phone and, with your thumbs and texting. I knew that was bad. And I knew that was just the beginning, and, I wasn't far off on that one either. Yeah, we asked people to pledge to stay offline, go outside, climb a tree, watch a sunset, have dinner with your family, get off your devices, and make sure that you reserve time to do that. And the whole intention of it was to make a habit before we needed to have the habit. And, we didn't accomplish our objective. Clearly, people have been drawn more and more and more, inside their devices. When and I think that so many people would answer the question the same way that you just did, about being there with people in the real world, the way that it's not just conflict resolution, but it's better problem solving when we're together.
That's what we have to do. I wrote about last week in my letter what I call the Wizard of Eyes risk, right? AIZ, sort of a play on Oz. This technology always has people behind it. And until we find our own tribe, our own packs, spend time with our own people, in our own environments, and just set those Wizard of Eyes aside, nothing's going to change. And that's where the real solutions are going to arise. And we need to, I think more and more people are seeing it. And I hope in our conversations, Eric, looking at media, looking at technology, how these two have merged to create this, powerful, but ultimately artificial narrative.
Well, I think that piercing the collective psyche of a country or of people who are using technology. How do you do that so people take a step back? And, you know, one, I would say, glimmering hope to me is there is a recognition of mental well-being and information that we consume. It's not just a small number of people who realize that the information that we take in and how it affects us, our mental well-being, there's a direct correlation. That's, to me, is the first step in sort of course correcting the directions that we're going.
I'm increasingly thinking that AI is going to crash.
You heard it here
I just
first.
don't think that people in the end want to be ruled by AI generated stories. And I think that we're going to be able to recognize them as AI generated stories. And I think that ultimately AI is not going to be what Sam Altman and everybody thinks it's going to be. And the reason is because ultimately people care about connecting.
Yeah,
Care about connecting with other people. People care about connecting with their environment, and AI doesn't give that to us. So that's where I think it's all headed.
No, I agree. I also think, like you, I think that it's going to be not so difficult to tell the difference between an AI generated story and one written by a person. And look, right now, what writers will tell you, or journalists will tell you, is they can use AI to, kickstart whatever it is that they're writing, but it's not nearly ready for quote unquote prime time, as it's not going to write an article the way a journalist would write an article. It will be easy for people to discern between, well, that came from AI. It didn't come from a person.
Right, but the thesis is that AI is going to get better and better, and eventually it will get there. I believe that thesis is wrong. I don't think it's going to happen.
I agree. So, the sky isn't really falling. Nevertheless, 85% of the stories, the sky will be falling. And everybody will, the drama is so much more interesting than the non-drama is, hey, it's a tool, use it. It can help you do your job. But that doesn't sell newspapers. That doesn't get clicks. The fear of the robot walking in and taking over my family, I don't want that. The fear of artificial intelligence guiding every single decision. I'm a little bit more concerned about my algorithms any old day that I go on the computer than I am about artificial intelligence.
Good to talk to you, Eric.
Nice to talk to you as always.
Thanks for all the insights.
The digital world.
Take care.